Hey guys. Okay, so
The canvas was a bank bag for deposits.
self-sufficient backyard. I had something else in my head and it ran away. So this one is on hand dug wells and piston pumps.
There's a confirmation code on this.
And this is gonna be kind of long, kind of medium.
Yeah, and murders never lie. We think that Martin Foster killed Charlie McCord, which means he did not.
Show this so I can use it on the video cover. So here we go, guys.
Right.
Hand dug wells and piston pumps. 19 years ago, we made the big move to a remote off-grid location in the wilderness of northern Saskatchewan, where we had a pristine lake from which to draw water. I utilized an electric pump to draw water out of the lake. The question I had to answer was, what system and pump do I incorporate to supply the new home with water? After a great deal of research, I chose a cast iron piston pump which ran off of 24 VDC. I was very satisfied with this pump. It was a great choice. The documentation stated that it has a vertical lift capacity of 25 feet, but again, depending on the elevation, tubing size, and joints, it will likely be somewhat less. I figured 21 feet was well within limits, and as it turned out, our sand knoll where the house was built sat less than 20 vertical feet above the lake surface. The horizontal distance from the house to the lake was 200 feet, which was of no consequence to the pump. The pump can be rebuilt, and I highly recommend buying a rebuild kit with multiple spare sets of leather cups. With proper care and maintenance, it should run a lifetime. After 17 years of use, I only had to change the leather suction cups once.
Wow.
The following describes how I set up our system. Before we built the house, we dug a root cellar underneath of where the structure would be located. The intent was not only to have a safe place to store our root crops and staples, but also to install the water pump and pressure tank there. We dug a trench from the house to the lake. This trench extended under the south knee wall of the house and intersected by the root cellar. The trench was approximately 30 inches deep by 14 inches wide and 200 feet long, all dug by hand. Thank goodness we had sandy soil as it made for relatively easy digging. What was frustrating and brutal was extending this trench out into the lake so that we could draw water even if the winter ice thickness was 30 inches or more. Preventing our water line from freezing in winter temperatures that can exceed minus 45 degrees was of paramount concern. To address this on the ground surface parallel to the trench, I connected multiple sections of 4-inch diameter PVC sewer pipe so that it was long enough to go from the house to the lake. Sorry, I'm spitting at myself. Although I ordered insulating foam collars, the hardware store dropped the ball and didn't order the collars, so I was forced to improvise. I wrapped the suction pipe in fiberglass insulation and then taped the insulation to keep it in place. I slid the insulated 1 1/4 inch PVC pipe into the 4-inch sewer pipe. Think of it as an insulated tubing inside a larger protective pipe. Next, I cut a strip of 1-inch styrofoam, blue board insulation the width of the trench, and laid it on the trench bottom. Blah, blah, blah. Then the whole pipe assembly was gently laid in the trench. Prior to doing this, I made sure the grade was sloping all the way to the lake without any humps or rises in the bottom of the trench that might create a problem. Humps might be a place where an air bubble could occur, or if trying to drain the line, a hump might not allow the pipe to drain completely. This entire assembly extended out into the lake. The other end was connected to the water pump under the house. As with the case of the main water system, a critical component of this system was a foot valve. I connected the foot valve to the end of the pipe that lay in the lake. The purpose was to make sure the water line and thus the water pump were always filled with water and primed for use. Without the foot valve, any water in the line that would have drained right back into the lake. Don't make the same mistake I made when I installed the foot valve. It was October and water temperature was already in the low 40s. as was the air temperature that day. I had chest waders on as I wrestled with a foot valve while standing in the lake. For some reason, I had to take the valve apart while I was out in the lake, and I dropped a retaining screw to the valve screen.
Oh no.
Kerplunk. In order to retrieve the screw, I got out of the waders, stripped down, and went frolicking in the surface. That was a miserable experience, and was the closest I've ever come to hypothermia. I was a popsicle. Lesson learned the hard way. To complete the installation of the pipe, I cut more styrofoam blueboard pieces, putting a vertical piece on each side of the line and a horizontal piece on top of it, essentially boxing in the 4-inch PVC pipe. I partially backfilled the trench with the dirt. Next, I laid a piece of 2-inch thick styrofoam blueboard 24 inches in width on top of the partially filled trench, and then finished backfilling. So at this stage, I had my suction line with the foot valve out in the lake. To finish the connections to the suction side of the pump located in the root cellar, I installed a coupler in the line. This was an easy way to disconnect the suction line if I ever wanted to take the pump out for maintenance. Then I put a T-E-E, in the line so that I could insert a funnel and fill the water line with water for priming. Once the water line was filled, the T was capped with a plug. There was also a plug on top of the water pump, which I removed so I could pour water into the pump chamber to prime it. Sorry, I have bones on. Now that my water line was connected from the pump to the lake, I had to finish plumbing the output side of the pump. Here's how I did that. On the output of the pump, I put another coupler. Then I installed a check valve. The check valve is another one-way valve. Another T-E-E, with a pressure gauge, and then a shut-off ball valve. The line out of the ball valve went to a pressure tank. Anywhere in the line to the pressure tank, preferably close to or on the pump, a heavy-duty pressure switch needs to be plumbed and wired in. The purpose of the pressure switch is to turn the pump off once the system is filled with water, thus achieving adequate pressure. Then when water is used in the house and the pressure drops, the switch is activated, turning the pump on once again. The purpose of the ball valve was to isolate the pump from the rest of the house. If for some reason I needed to take the pump off to do maintenance, I could shut the valve and any water in the pressure tank or house wouldn't leak out, meaning there was no need to drain the water from the house. The check valve will do the same thing, but I felt safer having a ball valve to shut off. Assuming the rest of the house is plumbed properly, once the pump motor is energized, the pump will come to life and you will love the steady rhythm of the piston pump as the system becomes filled with water. Despite all the insulating I did, can you believe our water line still froze our first winter there? What misery that created. We had many feet of ice covering the lake that I had to bore through with an ice auger to access the water. Then, using a pot as a ladle, we filled many 5-gallon buckets with water. We utilized our snowmobile and tote sled to transport all the buckets filled with ice water to the house and then manually lugged each bucket inside. No. Nada. Sorry. Bandit was trying to get over here. We did the bucket brigade routine for most of the winter whenever we needed water. We were sure glad to see spring and have an ice-free water line again. In the ensuing years, we mulched the water line with a thick blanket of chipped branches from the forest that we shredded with our chipper, and we installed an inline water heating cable. There are heating products specially made to keep water lines ice-free. They can either go on the inside of the pipe, inline, or be attached to the outside of the pipe. Either way, at 200 feet in length, it took considerable power to run the heater cable. But with some experimentation, we determined this cable did not need to be plugged in all the time. A few minutes in the morning and a few minutes at night did the trick. Additionally, we made sure the pump ran a few times during the day to keep the water line on the move. To keep the water in the line on the move. Wait! Go away. You're not going out there. Sorry, we still have to find something to cover the hole to the old heat run in the dining room so Bandit can't jump up in it. That's why we're keeping him in here. For now. Me and Aaron just have to figure something out.
That's impossible.
When we do, and we'll get that covered. Actually, I do think we have something. We just have to go get it.
Hey.
Kill that cat. Get him off from there. I'm
1979.
gonna freaking beat him.
This is gonna solve itself. We're not needed. The wedding is tomorrow. You should get your beauty sleep. I don't need sleep.
Why? You better not hit my actual painting.
You have this under control.
I didn't hit the painting, no.
That doesn't mean you didn't get it wet.
Didn't get it wet.
Okay, sorry guys. Anyway.
I'm gonna need a new bag.
Okay. In the ensuing years, we mulched the water line with a thick blanket of chipped branches from the forest that we shredded with our chipper, and we installed an inline water heating cable. Okay, never mind, I already read that, sorry. A couple of final notes. The power going to the pump was on a circuit breaker of its own. I also made sure I plumbed a small bypass line out of the pump's pressure relief valve to the outside. If by accident the pump started running while the shutoff valve was closed, it would have shot water out the pressure relief valve, filling our root cellar with water. Hence the need for the pressure relief bypass line. The pressure relief valve is a safety feature. Although we thoroughly filtered our water from the lake before we ever drank it, we knew we would have more peace of mind if we could eliminate the possibility of any waterborne disease or bug. So we decided to hand dig a well. This meant we would have a safer water supply. As an additional advantage, since the well would be closer to the house, we could save considerable power because the heater cable would be shorter. For the well location, I selected a flat site 100 feet closer to the house, which eliminated half of the distance of our suction line. That dug well was in pure sand. If you've ever been on the beach and dug a hole in the sand, you know it's not long before that hole fills with water and the sides collapse. I came up with a way to deal with that problem though. We purchased a flue, F-L-E-W, and in a plastic PVC culvert, 30 inches in diameter and a little over 6 feet in length. The culvert would be our well casing. We would ultimately stand that 6-foot culvert on its end and sink it in the ground. To do that required a hole in the sand at least 6 feet deep and 4 feet wide. With a shovel, I dug what I could until I hit water about 3 feet down. Now the walls started caving in, so we stood the culvert on its end and set it in the hole. Then I got inside the 30-inch culvert and bucketed out sand and water for hours. I'd hand Johanna a bucket full of water and sand, she'd dump it out and return the empty bucket. We were a true bucket brigade. We kept this up until I was exhausted and my hands were numb from the cold water. Slowly but surely, though, the culvert sank lower into the earth as I removed material from within the culvert. After several hours of the bucket detail, I eventually couldn't dig down any farther. At this point, I tied a rope around the top of the culvert and hung heavy sandbags from the rope around the perimeter. We had a gas-powered water pump we used for our fire suppression sprinklers. I attached a hose and pressure nozzle to the pump and fired it up. By running a high-pressure jet of water around the inside base of my pipe, I was able, with the aid of all the attached weight, to slowly sink the culvert into place. Essentially, I used pressurized water to blast material from around the base of the culvert. The weight of the sandbags did all the hard work for me. 2 additional points to make. We did not want to contaminate our well by pumping the high-pressure jet of water from the lake, since we would then be filling our well with lake water. Although it's a cold, clear lake, there were always bacteria and parasites lurking. So we drew from the well itself. Second, I insulated the outside of the well casing with styrofoam blue board. The well casing itself had a lid. On top of the lid, I put a thick layer of blue board, covered this with plastic, and then a layer of chipper mulch. Each fall, I piled on a thick blanket of cut evergreen brush, which acted as a trap for snow. The snow provided additional insulation. We never had our well freeze thanks to these protective measures. The water line from the hand-dug well to the house needed to be well insulated, get it?
So the way they been sure.
For the well,
I guess I should be glad you're still
and buried in the trench. This time I made sure our supplier sent the proper foam insulating collars made for the size pipe I was using. The insulated foam comes in various sizes and thicknesses. I opted for 1/2 inch thick. I figured it was better to over-insulate than skimp. I insulated the entire run from the well right up to where the pipe entered into the root cellar. Then I put the entire insulated assembly into the 4-inch PVC solid sewer pipe. I laid that whole assembly in the trench and backfilled. So in essence, I had an insulated piece of tubing inside of and protected by a larger 4-inch PVC pipe, the same setup as when it ran all the way to the lake. Now we had a safer water supply since we weren't drawing from the lake and we had the freezing problem essentially solved. We were without running water for 11 days during the well digging and pipe insulation ordeal, but it was worth it. And that was it for hand-dug wells and piston pumps. And I will go ahead and get that up there. So, hand-dug wells and piston pumps, guys. You know, one of the points I like to make with, especially the things in this book, the self-sufficient backyard, it doesn't matter how much money you guys have. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter if you decide to go get property off in the farthest reaches of anywhere, okay, to where if you feel like you're 1,000 miles from civilization, okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can make use of what you have to create a home for yourself where you can provide for yourself and your family. That's the point. One of the points this book is making. It's not impossible. Remember the series that I did on urban homesteading where I asked the question, could you create a homestead from wherever you are? The answer is yes, you can. And the next one, I was adapting that homestead mindset, and that's what it takes. And yes, I'm still kind of stuck on that because we've moved so much, and I'm having to refigure things out so much. But we'll get there, and you guys can too. So, with that, I'm going to get off from here. I'll get this up there, and I will see you guys on the next video. Leave any comments. Have you guys created your own water system for your own homesteads? Let me know what you did. So, I've had kind of an idea for our part of the property out there with our tiny homes. I'm honestly thinking of rainwater catchment. So, I'm going to be kind of, researching on that and doing videos on that as well. So, I will see you guys in the next video. And leave comments, you guys. Let me know. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys.